this evening's documentary, we will be discussing the effects of neonicotinoids in pesticides and the overall damaging effect that they have on the land, water, the water quality and the biosphere. The issue of the pros versus the cons will be discussed in depth, and evidence will be put forward for these two things. This will hopefully enlighten our viewers on the dangers of pesticides and chemicals such as neonicotinoids, and also the role that large companies and governments have in the processing of these chemicals for the economic and profitable benefits when they may in fact be detrimental to the land. On today's episode, we will be interviewing three very well-known environmentalists: Bear Grylls, David Attenborough and Steve Irwin. On this week's episode of Resource Global Resource Sustainability, we source you the sauciest of information brought to you by the best and most well-known, well, you could call them environmentalists. They are quite respected and they are very knowledgeable on topics such as these. We have Steve Irwin, Bear Grylls and David Attenborough, all coming in from London on Skype. So, Steve Irwin, how are you today? Just reeling in. James. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on your show today. Yes, I'm Steve Irwin. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show today. And it's great that I'll be talking about one of the most important things to us, our animals. And you, David Attenborough? Why, hello there, James. Yes, I am David Attenborough. And today I'll be talking to you about the effects of pesticides and neonicotinoids and also the majesty of nature. And finally, Bear Grylls, how are you today? James, I'm really glad to be on your show today, but currently I'm somewhere between London and my house on Skype, and it is quite desolate in here, and there is barely any food to eat. So before we start with our chat, I do recommend myself that I get some vitamin C and some iron. But on this topic today, I will be talking about, neonicotinoids and the really bad effect they have on the environment and vitamin C depletion in many cases of animals. Thank you. And yes, those are our guest speakers for this evening. But before they get into their explanations as to how things are with these neonicotinoids and other damaging pesticides, which are often released into use without any thought or forethought of what might happen to the actual environment, or not any forethought, but perhaps they don't really care because they're just looking for the profit. So anyway, this week we'll be expanding on George Monbiot's article DT 2.0. It's an informative article on the extreme dangers of neonicotinoids to the environment and the efforts of corporate influences to prevent their use being stopped. The title of the article immediately gives the audience the idea of the issue through its allusion to the catastrophic effect of the previous and now banned DT 2.0. George Monbiot is an English environmental and political journalist and author. He's a graduate in zoology and he's held visiting professorships at University of Oxford and Bristol and Keele and East London. He's well known for his environmental and political activism, and is a well-seasoned journalist with an informed interest in many political issues affecting the world. And he also has a website that he quite frequently updates. Now, earlier on we had a quick word to George Monbiot about his perception on objectivism and how he investigates into issues. And they say sometimes that people accuse him of not being very objective at all because he's quite an environmentalist. But he went ahead and told us that although it seems that way, he is quite objective, and in the end most of the time that's the truth. The environment is getting, well, in his words, trashed. Now the article, Monbiot is concerned with how neonicotinoids, right, are widely used as pesticides and ingredients without prior proper testing. it's now used in 127 countries and is now ripping apart the natural world. He draws a parallel with the resistance of the manufacturers at the time to the banning of DDT and the tactics that they used, right? And he compares them to the contemporary efforts to prevent the banning of the current, neonicotinoids. And, as they say, those who do not learn from history are destined to repeat it. Now, the corporations which make and produce these toxins have continuously made claims that they are harmless to other non-targeted pests, yet the companies that produce these, biocidal agents have conducted no extensive research whatsoever, not into the actual impacts, and Monbiot asserts, nor have they done it into the chemical processes involved in the dissolution, evaporation and the half-life of neonicotinoids in the soil and the ecosystem. It is only now that other independent and non-government scientists, are discovering the danger and the impacts and the damage it actually does themselves. Thank you. An abundance of evidence suggests neonicotinoids can provide an effective control to a broad range of insects. Nevertheless, the economic impact that neonicotinoids have on farming and the contribution that they have to yield increase in farming is small in relation to other older methods of protecting agriculture, and often the difference isn't very significant at all. Furthermore, over the past 60 years, as a result of many new scientific discoveries, artificial fertilizers and new agronomic techniques have increased remarkably. However, the pace of yield increase has slowed. So, the yield increase in many developed countries hasn't been more than modest in the past 20 years, with crops such as oilseed rape showing no correlation in an increase in production with the introduction of new pesticides which contain neonicotinoids. So, furthermore, if I stop it now there.